Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols Plus, a PlayStation podcast supplement. This is episode number 103, our second week of doing two a week. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined by my sons Ratchet and Clank, Chris, Raygun, Dustin, Furman. Chris, how are you today?
I'm good. I finished it yesterday.
Yeah.
I thought when I first went, like a couple episodes ago, I was like, I should probably finish it today. And then like I realized there was way more left, but not so much more that I couldn't finish it. So I'm glad I managed.
Well, I'm glad that you did as well. Short game. We'll talk about all of that.
Yeah.
In our discussion. And of course, Dustin, how are you doing today? What's going on?
I'm doing well. It's another Monday morning and just like like knocking out a bunch of random tasks, which is satisfying to just like boom, boom, boom. So, but it's nice, this doing a podcast is a nice, like almost little break, it feels like.
Definitely. I like doing all the podcasts, but I like doing Sacred Symbols Plus because it feels kind of nice and airy and light, especially these review discussions like we're doing today. As you said, kind of free form. They can get as deep or as light as we want them to be. And I assume this one will be a little bit of the lighter fare for us because it is Ratchet and Clank. So for the uninitiated, of course, we try to cover big releases on PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5 with spoiler cast type discussions. We've done, I don't know how many. Would it be, Chris, do you think we've done, 15? Do you think that's the right number?
Spoiler casts? Yeah, I think so. Maybe not us specifically, right. But like I think we've definitely got some games that we didn't even fucking touch.
Yeah,
they're like done spoiler casts for.
Right. So we're making a nice little back catalog here people can listen to whenever they want. We try to make them free eventually too. And now that we're doing 2 episodes a week, we'll be able to kind of get these out quicker, which I think is great. Because as we said a few weeks ago, I felt bad about rolling these out consecutive because if people didn't play the games or don't like this specific kind of content, they're kind of out for a little while. So we're going to start mixing these in more and more. And we did Resident Evil Village recently. I did Returnal with Rick Hogue. We're doing this. I still want to do a few more. I'm trying to get a Final Fantasy VII remake DLC one together, possibly led by COG. So we have a lot to cover here, but Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, Insomniac Games launched June 11th. So just about a month ago from when we are recording this. And I'm curious, let's start with you, Dustin. What did you think of the game?
So I'm kind of a newer Ratchet and Clank fan. The first one I played was the PS4 one, actually. So this is the second Ratchet game I've played, and I like this game quite a bit. There's a part of me that just like I can appreciate a game that isn't very good as long as it looks beautiful. Like I really appreciate like nice high fidelity and stuff. And this game was a real treat because not only is it like one of the most beautiful looking games ever, I think it's also like a total blast to play. And I will say what I think was surprising is that Ratchet and Clank 2016 really felt really tight combat. Like they had they had many games behind them, and somehow I feel like this game somehow feels even better as far as combat, and I don't even really know why. Like I couldn't put my finger on it. I don't know if it's just like feels more responsive or the weapons, or it's like something to do with like the haptic feedback on the DualSense or something, but I feel like this is just like the most refined Ratchet yet. I mean, I've only played 2, but from what I can tell, it's just like a very well done package.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'll go into my thoughts a little deeper after I throw this to Chris. I mean, what did you think about the game having just finished it? It's freshest on your mind probably. So what did you think about Rift Apart?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a good time. I thought it reminded me of like Saturday morning kind of cartoon. There's like a Pixar vibe to it, especially with the way that it looks. There's a lot of detail crammed into every environment, which is, not that that's necessarily new, but it definitely like shines really brightly in a universe that's as stylized as this, because you don't normally associate stylized like hyper cartoon looking areas or even just video games with a lot of detail. So I thought it was interesting that they managed to get something as simple as like, hey, this fur looks real without it being like a Sonic the Hedgehog situation where like it looks kind of deeply, disconcerting. I thought it was super good. Like I genuinely enjoyed my time with it. The weapons feel really dynamic and really like interesting. Although I will say sometimes I was like, are my weapons doing anything? There were like a handful of times, like the Enforcer, I loved it, but I never felt like it was doing much of anything until like, unless it was just mobs. In boss fights, I was like, all right, I can't use this. Fuck.
Right.
But aside from like minor nitpicks as far as like the way weapons function, I thought it was like a pretty solid game. I like that it's tight. I like that it's short. It doesn't overstay its welcome, I don't think. I think it knows exactly when to be like, we don't have anything left to show you, so we're gonna leave. And I appreciate that, especially now when a lot of games feel like they just keep going.
Yeah, they certainly do. So I think Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart is a great game. In some ways, it's always nice to play a game like this because it's a little bit of comfort food. I love Ratchet and Clank. I think it's a great series. I've not played them all, but I've played, I don't know, I probably would say I played most of them. And it's actually a series, as I recall, my sister got me into when I was younger, like early in college. She had a PS2 and she was really into like these various platformers. And I was much more in the role-playing games and stuff like that at that point, and starting to kind of burgeon into these more serious open world games like GTA 3. So she introduced me to Ratchet, and I've taken to the series in bits and starts. I think when it came back out in 2016 with that kind of budget priced, it wasn't budget style at all, which was awesome, but it was a budget priced Ratchet and Clank remake in 2016 again. I think that game is better than this game, and I think that that's a controversial thing to some people, but I'm a little bit surprised, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but I'm a little surprised about how unfine this game is, for lack of a better term. Insomniac usually really buttons up their games, and this goes all the way back to at least Resistance and even certainly before that. But their games are usually very fine, and there aren't a lot of problems with them. And I was shocked, actually, by how many problems this game had for me. It's not that they were like devastating or the game was crashing left and right. I was just surprised by, again, the lack of fineness in the development. It feels a little bit rushed in some respect, and it's certainly short, which I also think is a disappointment. In fact, I really slow played it because I realized when I played the game for the first time, I got through 33% of the game. And, because Insomniac always does a really nice job of telling you that on the load screens or when you're booting up the game. And I was like, Jesus Christ, like I got to slow down here. I don't want to beat this game in a weekend. I want to savor it a little bit more. I've been looking forward to it. So that was a big disappointment for me. But we have a bunch of letters from the audience that I think will allow us to, as we usually do, structure some interesting conversations around Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. I want to just start with the act of playing. Jason Brandt wrote in and said, which did you all prefer, fidelity, performance, or performance RT? Chris, I would assume that I think I know how we all played, but what did you take to here?
I went with performance RT just because it seemed entirely like I was worried that like, oh, maybe it was just like, because performance usually means like 60 frames locked, like you're not dipping at all. And usually when you see performance RT, like my assumption is like, oh, that means it's like targeting 60, but it might fall. In my experience, it didn't really stutter at all. Like I never saw like any like dropped frames, or at least any that that were perceptible to my eye. So like I was like, oh, I'm gonna do this. It looks nicer. You got some ray tracing in there. You got the 60 frames. I tried playing fidelity for a little bit, and I couldn't believe how terrible it felt, and I couldn't believe that people actually played that way. Like it's actually, it is sincerely astonishing to me that anybody would choose it. Although like, yeah, it does lead to the best looking screenshots as long as the game's like not in motion. But it was sincerely sickening. Like maybe I'm just getting like more and more susceptible to this type of thing, but it's pretty ridiculous.
What do you think here, Dustin, with the setting? I mean, I like that they have options, but I'm wondering, if you, because I think maybe even a year ago I would have gone with fidelity,
Right.
and I don't know why, but now PS5's kind of ruined me generally. So
Right. Well, it's interesting, you know, with this new generation, we've talked about how performance has become really like a mainstream, we'll say topic of gaming. It used to be a lot of people didn't care about this, and now we are seeing like kind of the average gamer want 60 FPS and really care about that, which is great. You got to wonder if it's like with the rise of like, you know, Digital Foundry, I think they have like over 1 million subscribers, and that's all they do is analyze performance. And so to see have, you know, having these options, I think is great, because then if you want that full 4K experience, you can. If you want smooth 60 FPS, or if maybe you want a little bit of both, that's there. I think what is really interesting to me right now, though, is that I think it was just on July 1st, around then, they actually added an update to the fidelity mode that if you have a 120 hertz TV, it'll run at 40 FPS instead of 30 FPS, which you may be thinking like, well, it's only 10 frames, but it's almost the smaller the amount, the more noticeable those 10 frames are. So like the difference between 100 and 110 is not going to be that great, but 30 to 40 is huge. But it's really just kind of an interesting technique. What they did here is because the TV is running at 120 FPS, you can, you know, do 3 refreshes per frame. So 40, 80, 120. And it's supposed to get like almost like an in between for fidelity mode that's a lot smoother. And I just thought, I was like, whoa, that's kind of thinking outside the box. And I mean, we've seen Insomniac do like incredible stuff over and over. No one thought that the ray trace performance mode was even possible. So I'm always happy to see weird stuff like that.
I must say, to the point, I think you had mentioned earlier, Dustin, that this is arguably one of the most beautiful games ever. I totally agree. Even in performance mode, I think the game is gorgeous. I didn't need anything else. And I found personally that the movement of the characters and the animations and all of this is part of the aesthetic allure of the game, not just the gameplay fluidity. In other words, when you would, I think I said this and I tweeted it out, an image of it, although I don't think it, or maybe some video that I don't think did it really justice, because PS5 just compresses the shit out of everything when you tweet. But I was stunned by how good the game looked at certain points. And the dash mechanic, especially, I just looked at it over and over again. I just did it hundreds of times. I was like, this is one of the most beautiful things ever. And I reached out personally to my friend Marcus Smith, who directed this game. He's the director of Resistance and Sunset Overdrive. And I want to bring it up because I don't think he'll mind. I don't think he'll mind at all. When we were texting, I was like, you know, the game's great. And I got to say, man, I am really into this animation. And he said, Steve Ryder, the same animator who made all the Sunset Overdrive respawn animations and Spider-Man Fast Travel, did that. So you can see the same, first of all, and I said it on Sacred Symbols, you can see the Sunset Overdrive influence hardcore in a lot of that. And even in the way they respawn and stuff, it's actually quite funny how there's connectivity there. But I wanted to give a shout out because we don't often talk about animations, and this game has the fluidity of a cartoon. It looks like a cartoon, even in performance mode. It everything about it is beautiful. The texture and the depth. When I was playing it, I was remarking to Micah, I was like, what's so fascinating about 3D games like this, as opposed to kind of the trick 3D games we used to do where things weren't really there, or draw distance and everything kind of precluded you seeing too much in the fog and all of that. I was like, man, those objects are really there. These aren't tricks. Like when you're in one of the cities on the planet, it's like the car is way back in the distance. They're there and you can't go there. But I don't know. I was just really stunned. And I agree. This game has so much aesthetic allure that there's no wonder that they want to make this into something for children. And that brings us into the next question, because I was curious about what Badly Brave here wrote in about on Patreon and had to say about the plot. And I don't know if you guys as newcomers are going to perceive this as much, but I'm curious. He says, while the narrative is not necessarily the biggest draw of these games, how do you fellas think this game's story holds up against the rest of the series? I liked it a lot, but was kind of disappointed it ignored previous character arcs, such as Nefarious turning good, and also sidelined Quark pretty heavily. I didn't mind that so much as I minded the game is taking a childlike bend now, and I feel distracted by some of the cuteness of the game that I think wasn't there originally. And I think it's incredibly adorable, and the multi-textured humor is awesome and really appreciated. But I don't quite understand if they're trying to make it what it was, which was something alluring for both adults and children, or if it's something that's really just now for children. Dustin, what was your take on that?
Yeah, it. Someone brought up on Sacred at one point about how the name doesn't have like the innuendo anymore. Like there's like Ratchet and Clank Up Your Arsenal, right? And this one, what was this? People tried to say it was ripped apart instead of like that's supposed to be the innuendo, which I'm like, maybe.
I don't buy it.
Yeah, that's one of those like it. I don't know, but I feel like you got to wonder what they're thinking about what to do with Ratchet, because clearly it is something that they're targeting more towards children. They tried to make an animated movie, which is where the last game actually came from. It's actually a movie spin-off game. And to my understanding, the movie wasn't very, I mean, not that it was horrible, but it wasn't very good or well received. So they've kind of just fallen back into Ratchet being, a console game. But I don't really know what other ways they could branch him out. And I also was starting to wonder if maybe Ratchet is getting a little tired from like he in one sense he's bigger than ever and is more appealing to more audiences. But there's so many games in the franchise that is it like gonna be too much for the older fans?
Yeah, well, I mean, Seth Bain kind of wrote into us and gets into this a little bit as I pitch it over to Chris, because he says, "Hey boys, what happened to Ratchet and Clank? Does anybody remember the original PS2 games were farcical takes on commercialism with a much drier and more satirical sense of humor? Every character in those games would selfishly try to sell you on a product or service, and the game's story is focused on the companies and systems that enabled the in-game firearm economy to exist. With the blockbuster-like presentation of the new games, and specifically with games like Tools of Destruction and Rift Apart being showcases of powerful new hardware, has Ratchet and Clank lost its edge and become the commercialized product they were satirizing in the first place? Of course, these games have always been products made to make money, but these new games seem to be more of a spectacle than before and have seemingly abandoned the themes and tongue-in-cheek nature that made them Ratchet, as opposed to just action platformers." I agree with this, but I don't. To me, Chris, I just think they look at it and they say, like, we didn't succeed in this other way. Like, Ratchet and Clank is actually more relevant now than ever. And it's been 19 years. Their last Ratchet and Clank game is by far, as I understand, the best-selling Ratchet and the most profitable Ratchet. And what they did with that, and I know a lot of people take umbrage with my description of this, but they took Ratchet and Clank and made them friends. And in the original game, they're not. They're not friendly with each other in the beginning. And they made it so it's a little bit more childlike. I'm curious if that shines through to you, and if you think that they're trying to embrace maybe a missing spot that they tried to fulfill with Knack and others, which is we need a kids game, and we need it now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel kind of a couple ways about this. Now, I can't say that I've played many previous Ratchet games. I think maybe I've touched like a handful of them. I know I've seen videos on some of the older ones, and that's my entire experience. But I can say while I was playing this, while I did enjoy the experience and while I did think it was cute, I did distinctly say out loud to myself a couple times, like, all right, this is cute, I get it. Like there were a lot of times where like characters will be like, no, you're the best, thank you, sir, you're the best, thank you. And it's like, all right, okay, we got it. And it's like there's very little conflict with it. In fact, I actually think it's interesting that like Rivet and Kit have the most inner turmoil between them as far as like actual tension between the heroes than anybody else. And I found them more interesting. It's like, oh, that's kind of like exactly what the original Ratchet and Clank was in the first place. It was like tension, right? It was like, oh, these two characters that don't really see eye to eye or whatever. I don't know if this Ratchet and Clank being the most successful is necessarily indicative of like, oh, it's a cute game, so much as it is, hey, PS5 showcase, big deal. like PS5 exclusive, really, really massive deal. Insomniac after Spider-Man, that makes a huge difference as well. I know the last one sold quite a bit as a budget title and as a movie tie-in, which I think is also part of it. I don't know if those games failed because they were tongue in cheek and because they were kind of, I don't want to say cynical, but a little bit more adult. I think I didn't think they failed at all. I think those games' successes are the reason why we have a Ratchet and Clank now, and I don't necessarily view those things as necessarily intrinsic. I don't think this game is better for being cuter than anything else. But I do think they are looking to fill some kind of void in their kids game department, which I think is I think they could have done that with previous Ratchet and Clank. You can make games and like even media and stories and any kind of content you can make that will appeal to, adults and kids alike. And there's plenty of people who prove that you can do that. And I think this kind of does, but it's definitely way, way, way on the cute side.
Yeah, it is. And I found it, I don't know, Dustin, I don't know if you agree with this, but I did find it endearing. I liked the characters. Like, I liked how they found themselves in various ways. Like, I liked Rivet and Ratchet's growing friendship or whatever it is. I liked how someone had written in, I think it was Seth saying that, or maybe it was someone earlier saying that they sidelined Quark. I kind of liked that. It was cool. Like, Quark played an important role, but it took a little time to get to that in the alternate dimension. And I've never personally found Nefarious to be a very entertaining or interesting villain. It's not why I play the game. I think he's a pale comparison in a lot of ways to other cooler evil scientist bad guys. And I liked Kit. I liked the character of Kit, and I liked Clank. But it's important to remember, as I recall, like at the end of the original Ratchet and Clank, like Clank and Ratchet are in such a way that like Clank is busted and Ratchet's like, you're just going to stay like that. As far as I remember, like that was the kind of friendship they had, or lack thereof. So it is interesting to see them embrace that. Do you think they're going to keep trying with this? Because I think what people are kind of missing with Insomniac, and perhaps I'm wrong here, is Insomniac actually seems to be maybe becoming like the T for teen studio in some way, or the E for everyone studio. When you really look at everything that they're doing, only London really has that bona fide. So what do you think?
Yeah, so to speak about some of the characters, Chris brought up the conflict between Rivet and Kit, and I have to agree that that's like one of my absolute favorite parts, just because I don't know about you guys, but like when you found out that she was the one that took off her arm, like I didn't see that coming, and I was like, I really should have. This is like a game for kids. Like, how did I not realize that? But as far as Insomniac, I feel like, making a studio that's more focused on T for teen and like E10, I think makes a lot of sense in the fact that I'm guessing, do a lot of parents that buy games for kids say like, oh, well, you're not allowed to play T for teen games. You're only allowed to play E games. Like, I feel like the market share for teen games would be just as big, especially if if the content is like light violence and some swearing. You know what I mean? So they might be able to appeal to a broader market by focusing their games on like somewhere in between kids and adults.
Yeah, I think in some way, Insomniac has been, or was inadvertently, I guess Sony was inadvertently kind of sending the wrong message about their games. We have these cutesy characters, and then they're in a game called Going Commando. We have these really accessible looking characters, and we're putting them in these. What message are we sending the kids? And I think maybe it's not so much a child's game, although I think this game is remarkably easy actually, but it's not so much that. I think it's about giving a parent a gateway drug or something. That's kind of a nefarious way of putting it, pardon the pun, but like a gateway into the system without saying like, well, you're not gonna play Bloodborne, you're not gonna play Last of Us, here's something we can play together. And I really do feel like they were trying to do that with Knack. I really do feel like they're trying to do that in some kind of half-assed way with Sackboy. And this is a AAA kind of way to say, a $70 very expensive and premium way to say, we have something for everyone here, and we're not going to give it some fucking sexual innuendo name, right? Like that was the whole weird part about all that. So,
well, and you brought up Knack, which I think is a great point, because Knack is so interesting to me in that, like, I don't know, is Knack appealing to non-children at all? Like, I know that there's people that are like, yeah, Knack was great, Knack was cool, and it's like a meme or whatever, but I don't like, when you have you seen the characters in Knack that aren't Knack, like the human characters? They look like Aldi version, like Pixar, like they should be on a Grubhub commercial or something. Like,
yeah.
So
they look like Illumination, like Despicable Me type people. It's very bizarre.
Right. So it's interesting because while it's like Knack doesn't feel like a baby kiddie game, but if there's a delicate balance between like kids game that appeals to adults and not at all, that one was definitely leaning the wrong direction. And I feel like they've been able to morph Ratchet into something that, you know, maybe it's a little easier to ask dad to go buy that game because he wants to play it too. Like, and that works out.
Yeah, I think the one piece of the puzzle they're missing here, and what they really should have tried to do, they got a little greedy, I think. And well, let's talk about this now before we get even the game. We're kind of looking at the bigger picture, but Tim Copeland wrote in, who perhaps is related to one of the greatest drummers of all time, The Police's Stuart Copeland, says, "Hey guys, love the show. It makes life bearable for a few hours a week." Jesus Christ, Tim. My question's simple and will undoubtedly be echoed by others. But while I found the game fun to play, I was kind of irked by the fact I paid $70 for what truly felt like a tech demo for the PS5. I know the argument about time played equals value argument is trite, but I felt like an expensive tech demo to me, or it felt. Did y'all feel similar, or am I just a mad lad? All the best. So I will say that I don't mind $70 price points for first-party games and second-party games. But I think part of that calculus, Chris, of what made Ratchet succeed again in 2016 was the price point. And I don't think that they should have charged $40 for this, but I think they should have charged $50. And I don't know that it would have really, I'm sure it would have injured the bottom line. I mean, they're making a lot of money at $20 a rip. But I just feel like with a first-party game, you had these good feelings going on. But I also think that they were like, we don't want to peg this franchise as this budget franchise. We did it because it was a remake of the original game or a reimagining. So do you think they got the price right, or do you think that, like, similar to Returnal, people have a right to be kind of irked by paying $70 for this?
I think the price is fine. Like, I didn't feel like I was paying for a tech demo, although, like, I'm sure in some respect you are, but it's not like some kind of like, it's not like a 2-hour, like, oh, look at what the PS5 can do. It's like a proper, like, fleshed out story. There's a lot of work put into it. There's a lot of good character work. There's fun voice acting. There's fun music. There's really impressive level design and combat sequences. And I don't think, like, I think people are a little bit too haphazard with their use of the term tech demo. You know, I don't think people remember what tech demos actually are.
I agree. Yeah, a tech demo is not a 10 to 12 hour game with AAA production value.
Like maybe you could argue something like Flower was kind of like a tech demo, but even that's like, I don't know. Just because something's not like 200 hours long doesn't mean it's a tech demo, you know?
Yeah, that's true. It's a good point. Dustin, what do you think about the price point? I feel like the revolution is in making Ratchet, like, part of making Ratchet and Clank a thing perhaps could be totally catered to kids, even the kids, like, let's say they have an allowance, they don't have a job, so the games are even cheaper. Like, something where it would be cool to market it in such a way if they were going to do that, being like, this is a series for younger people. But I do think that I'm probably right in the sense that they don't want to isolate this franchise, as they have to raise the price maybe at some point, so they just did it immediately. But I do feel like it's not, I don't know. It's hard to kind of suggest this as a $70 game. I don't know that this is what I necessarily envision as that.
I could see them being in a complicated point where you have new hardware out, you change the price to 70, and then one of your big games that was part of the reveal is then not 70. And so you're already kind of mixing the message up there. And you also mentioned about not wanting it to appear as a budget title. But this is difficult, man, just because I totally get if there's a person who, only has so much money for games and you need a little more bang for your buck. And so getting this and beating it in a weekend would maybe feel a little disappointing, even if it's a good experience. At the same time, though, the PlayStation 5 is less than a year old. It's $500 for the disc version. And so I'm not surprised that there is premium priced content that is on the shorter side at the launch of the console, because it's the people that want to be in day one and are willing to pay more for stuff that are going to be there. So Sony's like, why wouldn't we charge them $70? They're already here for a premium. So of course, you know what I mean? So
No, I understand. I understand
it's a duality thing. Like,
I think that they're to the point you're making, it's hard to go in early and break the rule already. They
Right.
want to keep this price point going. I don't know. I think it would have been more attractive. I think in some way people quibble about $10 or $20 in ways that don't make a whole lot of sense. This is a lot of money, but it's not an extraordinary amount of money. But if you make these decisions 3 or 4 times, then that's another game you've been able to buy for the same amount of money. So I totally understand what people feel or how people feel in this regard. But let's talk about playing the game itself. Dustin, let's stick with you. What did you think about the beat to beat gameplay? I think this is where obviously the game shines, but I also think what's so funny about Ratchet is that it suggests that you need to play it a certain way if you want to be a completionist, which I do, which is basically that I just rotate through all of my weapons evenly, no matter what the situation is, with very rare exception. Doesn't matter who I'm fighting. I'm like, if this is level 3 and everything's level 4, I'm using the level 3 item until it's level 4. That's always been the way I've played Ratchet. It's not. So I'll tell you this. I've swung my Ratchet to and attack an enemy definitely fewer than 10 times in the entire game.
whoa.
Like never
Dang.
would do that. I would always use my gun. So how did you feel? How did you play it?
Well, it's funny that you brought that up, your play style, because I think the first week that we talked about it on Sacred, you had mentioned you did that, and I was like, that actually sounds like an interesting way to play the game. And so I actually started doing that afterward. And it creates like a little layer of self-imposed challenge when it's like, all right, all I have is the weapon that does like the knocking back and forth.
Yeah,
and it's like
the ricochet weapon. Yeah.
the ricochet. That's it. And it's not really working in this situation, but damn it, I'm gonna use it and level it up. So yeah, I ended up switching around quite a bit, and I don't think I upgraded all the weapons, but overall, as far as a gameplay experience, I think what I appreciated about this is that there was some nice ways that they changed up like what you were doing. I really liked it when you were like walking on the walls in space and then like switching between like the one planet was like, I think it was the mining planet where it was like literally blown up in the one dimension and then actually like people mining in the other dimension, which was a cool switch. And then like riding the bugs was also very cool. And it was just a nice like, you're not doing one thing for too long necessarily. And so that's always like a nice way to change it up.
I do that. I mean, it's a metagame. It's an OCD metagame, but it stops you should you want all the trophies. Although I don't know that this game required you to do it, but I'll look. It's the only way to not grind at the end, basically. And
Right.
that when you get to the end, you basically have a full range of any weapon you can possibly need. Although, again, the game never really posed much of a challenge in almost any regard to me on normal difficulty. Chris, how did you play? What was your rhythm? What did you think of the beat-to-beat gameplay and all the rest?
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine that the way that any of us played was considerably different, because it's a fairly straightforward game with very straightforward design that kind of makes you play in a specific way. I did use the those oh my god, what the gravity boots a lot, like when you could like skate around, just because I thought that was like so fun to do. Like even in situations where like that was objectively just like not the smart thing to do. I was just like, I want to skate around because this feels really cool. It's actually, I feel like kind of like a bit of an underutilized part of that game, because it's genuinely super fun to move fast in this game. Um, but overall, like I would just sort of I would use a weapon until it was out of ammo, and then I would switch to something else, and then I would switch to something else. Just because a lot of the weapons are super fun. I love that topiary sprinkler thing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The
Very
ricochet, I
clever.
honestly really enjoyed. Something's really satisfying about just knocking enemies back and forth. The enforcer was super strong. I think it's the enforcer, right? The shotgun type.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of weapons. A lot of this is a very weird game because like I found like some of the weapons to be like, oh, this is like a really cool and really useful thing, and then others I'm like, why is this even in here? Like, I got this thing that sounded cool. It was like a black hole machine gun, and then I got it, and it sucked. Like it was like it didn't do fucking anything. It almost made me wonder like, wow, there's a lot of weapons in this game, but I wonder if like they could have just like slashed this list in half and just had like one really satisfying arsenal. If it would have been a little bit more enjoyable. Also because like there's no guarantee that you and I have the same exact weapons at the end. You know, like I know I didn't finish my second wheel when I got to the final boss because I was like, well, I'm not going to grind because I don't care enough to.
Right. I don't think most people probably do. You know.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I was just going to say I think Insomniac always pride, or especially with Resistance in this series, always prided themselves with a bunch of different weapons. But maybe you do have to kind of cater it towards something a little bit more, a less quantity, more quality.
Yeah. And not that there weren't like amazing weapons in this, because there were, but and there were certain areas where like the clank puzzles and like the little like spider robot that I did exactly 2 times each and skipped every single.
Yeah,
other time.
all right. Let's get into that. Joey wrote in and said, "What did you guys think of Glitch and her gameplay sections? I thought it was cute how at the beginning of the game she was super anxious and self-doubtful, then ultimately became more confident in herself and her abilities. I did like the evolution of that character. I thought it was awesome. She's adorable. But I do agree. When I realized that I can skip them, not only those parts with the crab, but also the clank puzzles are just, I'm like, this sucks. I don't want this at all. These are things that are I really feel like these are things that are put into design to bloat gameplay so that you don't beat the game in 6 hours. I do think that. So talk to me a little bit about those. Did you also skip them, it sounds like? Chris?
I definitely skipped them. Yeah. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Like after a while, I was just like, this is Lemmings. This is Lemmings.
Dude, exactly. That's what I thought too.
Yeah, because it is. That's why that's why you thought it, because it's just straight up. And then like the spider robot thing, it's like because the game's all about shooting things. And then to pad the game out, they put you in a little spider robot to give you a break from shooting things to make you shoot more things as a spider robot. And it was like, if I'm going to shoot things, I want to shoot things as Ratchet or Rivet. Like I don't want to like shoot things as a spider that's stapled to the ground that can like kind of like, ooh, maybe I can walk on the wall now. And it's like, I get it. And the fact that you could skip those puzzles and still get the character moments, because it skips all the way up until like you finish the task, and then it gives you like Glitch's like dialogue and then like her story, for lack of a bit. Like you get the entire thing that you get out of that story, even if you skip it. So I was like, oh, if I can skip it and still get this cute character saying shit, then like I'm just gonna do that, because I just didn't find it fun. I feel like Insomniac does this thing a lot. Miles Morales is the only one that I can think of that didn't do this, where in recent years anyway, where they just feel this weird need to like throw this padding, not even necessarily for game length, but just for like, oh, well, we need to give players a break. It's like in Spider-Man PS4, they were like, players need a break from being Spider-Man. And it's like, if I'm playing Spider-Man and I want a break from being Spider-Man, I'll play something else or I'll stop playing Spider-Man.
Go outside.
Like that's the break. Like I don't need a break in the thing. It's insane.
No, I
don't understand this mentality at all. Like
I totally
agree. It truly is baffling. Even though stealth sections and I mean, this isn't Spider-Man conversation, but you know, that's what it felt like when I was going through these Clank and Glitch sections, where it's like, all right, I get it, but like I'm playing Ratchet and Clank. Let me play Ratchet and Clank. It's not that Glitches sections are necessarily bad or Clank sections are necessarily bad. I'm sure plenty of people like them and find them to be like a nice little change of pace, but it's just not necessarily the thing I care about when I'm playing a game like this.
That's exactly the way I feel too. It's funny because I'm playing Scarlet Nexus right now. We'll do a conversation on that in a few weeks, I think, but I'm 25 hours into the game and they introduced this entire different way of playing almost. Not just for this one boss battle. I'm like, this sucks. I don't want to do this. This sucks. This is annoying me. This is not the game. And yet, Dustin, I did feel a little bit of a cheater when I would skip that. I was almost disappointed that Insomniac let you skip those. Because on one hand, it's allowing you to, it's very accessible. Those things annoy people. But then it kind of begs the question, like, what? You don't even believe in enough in this to just, it really does. It is there as a roadblocks. It's the same thing. I mean, we were bringing up Spider-Man, what they did with the experiments and all of that. We brought that up a million times on the show. I don't like when this is why the playtime argument in some way is so fraught. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, the thing for me, particularly in the spider tank sections, is that I really liked the first time I did it. I was like, that was a fun little thing to do. And then the second time I was like, that was less fun because I've done it before and it was mostly the same concept. I think I did one more and then I skipped them all after that because they don't really evolve or change in any type of way. Not that everything needs to be different all the time, but I was like, I feel like I've done this. I've seen this. Like, I don't know really what this is other than, like you said, filler in a lot of ways. The Clank puzzles at least get somewhat more difficult as you go. But again, by the end, even though they were, changing, I kind of just didn't want to do it anymore. Like I was more, as I got closer to the end of the game, I'm like, I don't want to do it. I'm getting close to the end. Like, just let me keep progressing. It's like I get in that zone when you're in like the last third of a game where I don't want to do any of that other stuff. Yeah. So I guess the question is, they did this for Spider-Man, which was a full-length game that didn't need any bloat added to it, which Chris brought up that the argument was like, oh, time not being Spider-Man, which is ridiculous. But, this is two separate mechanics or like game features, whatever you want to call them, that are added to extend the game time of the game. I wonder, like, if you put them all together, if you did all of them, both the spider tank sections and the Clank parts, how much would it add? At least an hour, probably, right?
Yeah, I would say even more than that. I think if you did them back to back, you would become better at them, and so you would blaze through them fast. But I think part of the reason that they act as or speed bumps is because they are separated from each other. So you kind of have to remember what was going on with them. It's not just the only way to play. I wanted to discourage. I remember having this problem, I think in Arkham City or something a long time ago, where they're introducing things like 20 hours in. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Teach the person how to play the game within the first hour and then let them go and make the game harder itself or make the game more engaging. And I know a lot of people wrote in. I mean, we already talked about this, so I'm not going to read it, but some people did have problems with the length and the connection to the value and all of that. But I want to say the one thing that really made this game stand out, and it's becoming a common theme with PS5 exclusives, is the controller. This game's use of the DualSense is exceptional. I don't think it's as good as Returnal, which I think is much more dynamically used, and shocking how good it is in that game. But this game, I want to just give a shout out for its just incredible use of the DualSense. It is so satisfying to use. It feels great. The sounds coming out of the controller, it's so different than the PS4. I remember being so startled when we were playing PS4 and Shadowfall at launch, and the audio apps or logs are coming through your controller, and I'm like, this is fucking annoying. I don't want this. And now it just feels so much more subtle, so much more part of the design. The nature of the feel of the controller with the sound, the audibility of the sound as well. Playing next to someone all the time who's playing something else on her Switch or whatever, she would never even really understand what was coming out of the system and what was coming out of the controller. I really enjoyed the controller. Chris, what did you think about the use of the DualSense here?
I'm in agreement with you that it didn't strike me as much as Returnal did. Returnal, I think, does it a lot more expertly, to be honest. But I think it does what it needs to service the weapons and to service the overall soundscape. It feels, it's more of a subtle approach where like the Ricochet has like this kind of like this occasional rumble to it, and it has like the little ting sound coming out. The secret to the speakers in the controller is ideally you don't want voices coming out of there, because voices, I think that speaker just isn't good enough to handle. Like if someone's talking to you through that controller, it's going to sound like shit. Like it just is, because you know how people are supposed to sound. But like weird kind of ethereal fake weapons have a lot more creative leeway with how you're able to kind of get the message across through sound. And I think that's why it's so satisfying, is because it knows exactly what parts of the audio to funnel through the controller, and it knows exactly like how to time it with specific shots. It knows exactly how to pair it with the tension on the triggers for certain weapons. It's done really well, but it's done subtly to the point where like I wasn't really thinking about it ever until maybe like the very end, when I was like, all right, I'm getting kind of, I've been through this cycle a lot. I'm shooting a lot of things, and I'm kind of losing a little bit of interest, not to the point where I'm bored, but like my mind is wandering, and I'm like, oh wow, the controller's actually doing some crazy cool shit. I didn't realize it until like probably like the final, after the point of no return, So it's pretty well done.
Yeah, what do you think, Dustin? I feel like when it comes to the controller and also the cards, when you bring up the cross media bar, when a game uses the cards, so Scarlet Nexus actually uses them pretty well. I'm like, oh, this is nice. But then the controller is like half-assed. The game is not made for PS5 at all. The draw distance is awful. There's all these things that are wrong with it. And then when you see it, when you play a game with the controller that does it right, you're like, oh man, it's such a shame that not every game does this, and that the capabilities are there, but it seems like only first and second party have really truly taken advantage. And of course, the Astrobot is the tour de force on the controller, but everything is amazing. So what did you think about it in conjunction with this particular game?
I think what I like so much right now about the DualSense, and this applies to Ratchet, is that the games that do it well always do it in a different way that somewhat surprises me. And I think the thing for Ratchet in particular is just how many different feelings they were able to get out of the different guns. Specifically, like the shotgun that has the 2-stage click on the trigger is like feels really nice and satisfying, particularly in contrast to, I mean, totally different style game, but the triggers in Resident Evil, some felt more cumbersome at points. Like you would hit the trigger and then it would like not like you wouldn't be able to hit it multiple times. It would feel kind of just off. But what's so exciting to me is that this is the early days of the DualSense, and we've already seen, like, Chris brought up Returnal, really cool. Ratchet and all the different guns. We'll talk about this on the normal episode this week, but I'm playing Plague Tale right now, and it has like really cool DualSense. Like you can feel the rats crawling around through the controller. It's like really creepy and weird, but it's cool. So I'm just excited to see, devs like Insomniac, Insomniac, their first party, so they're kind of they have to at this point, but see devs like figure out like, okay, what kind of feelings can we portray through rumble and like little sound cues? Because I think Chris is right. Like the best way to use that the speaker on the controller is like little tiny things. I think Demon Souls, like it would, like if your sword would clash against something, it would come through the controller, but it's not like you're gonna hear a guy that's like, hey, how's it going, through your controller, which is just never good.
So I want to give a shout out just real quick before we move on, because I didn't bring this up before. We were talking about weapons and the value of Insomniac's level of production. You have to give a shout out to weapons like the Pixelizer. We brought up the Topiary Sprinkler. The Pixelizer is not a new weapon. The Topiary Sprinkler, I think, is. And then the Mr. Fungi, which is kind of a take on Mr. Zircon. And we see Mrs. Zircon and Zerkies in the game, which is dope. I love Mr. Zarkon. He's like my favorite character in all of the Ratchet games. And I really love the work and effort and time and love and design heft that goes into these weapons. The pixelator, can you imagine how much complication that adds to your game? And how much you have to QA it and all the animations you have to do. And it's the same thing with the topiary sprinkler. Like every enemy must deal with this differently. And it's a whole new set of animations, a whole new set of QA challenges to overcome. And I really love that they do that. And it goes to what Chris was saying earlier, where you almost feel like they just would get rid of like the black hole storm and even they brought back some things that are cool, like the buzz blades. And there are some newer weapons like cold snap and stuff. But I just feel like there's something special there. That's the special sauce of Insomniac. It's almost why I want Resistance back, because of course they had awesome weapons in that. Like I remember the auger, which shot bullets through walls and you could see all the enemies through the walls, but the bullets would go slower. So you had to like time them and all that. It was super neat. They've always had an eye for that. So I want to give that a shout out. But Chris, I'm curious what you think about the way you play. Brendan Brewster wrote in about this. He says, "Good day. I love Ratchet and Rivet, but I couldn't help but feel like they should have had slightly different moves and weapons to diversify combat a bit more. Do you guys feel like this would have been beneficial or too much extra work for the devs? And also, should we have been able to play as Kitten or Iron Giant form for a sequence? I felt like we were building up to that, but it never happened. I do feel like that would have been a little bit more cool, like some just part of the game where you just destroy everything and it's not even really playing. Maybe it's a little bit on rails, but I actually remember, Chris, we brought this up, I think, on the regular show, and I think you and I are both in agreement, and I think Dustin is too, that one of the things they did right here was making Ratchet and Rivet the same. It's a very video game thing. They have the same items, the same purse of bolts, the same upgrades. They each just go to their own planets. It's very video gamey, but I really liked that because it felt steadier. I hate to say this, but I didn't want to play as two characters. If they were going to make them change, I would have been like, I just want to play as Ratchet. And let's just leave it there. Yeah. So how did you feel about that approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think they did a good job with the way they did it. Like, could they have like maybe stood to maybe animate them a little bit differently? Maybe that would have helped in some way, alleviate some of the complaints that he's talking about. But overall, I appreciated the fact that it was a consistent experience, even though that doesn't really make sense, because it just shows like, you know what? It is just unnecessary effort for something that is ultimately probably like going to turn more people off than anything. Because I know that I would have had a hard time finishing this game if it was just constantly swapping between two completely different characters that controlled completely differently. That would have been phenomenally annoying, and especially because like so much development time is going into, like you said, that these weapons and these animations and making sure that every enemy is affected by every weapon in a different way, and I would have rather had that development time go to that than having Rivet feel slightly different while still keeping the same upgrades and still keeping the same gun. Like, I don't know. I just don't think it's a worthy use of development resources. And to be honest, I feel like you can even feel that in the game in some places where it's like, wow, these weapons are like really, really good. And here's the same purple laser swipe across the battlefield boss about like 10, 11, 15 times. It felt like every time that boss came up, I was like, here we go. Here's this guy again. So you can already feel like where the development was kind of like pushed into the weapon sandbox and like how enemies reacted and animations to go along with it. So I wouldn't have wanted even more cutback.
Sure.
For something that ultimately doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah. What do you think about this, Dustin? Do you think that, I don't know. I think Chris and I just agree that they needed to do something like this if they wanted to incorporate the characters. And in fact, the whole rift dimensional aspect of it maybe even makes it make a little bit more sense than it otherwise would.
That actually, you brought up exactly what I was about to say, is that it makes sense for the story that they would have the exact same combat style. Like, I can maybe see that when you're using the melee attack, whether it's the ratchet or the hammer, that maybe there could be some variation just for fun. But I'm with you guys in the fact that if I would have had to choose or like have different weapons for each one, naturally you're gonna like lean towards one or the other probably, and then when you're forced to play as the other one, it's gonna be like, oh, I kind of liked, Clank or Ratchet's weapons a little more. So I feel like this was fine. Like you said, it's video gamey and it serves gameplay above all else. And in something like this, I think that is what made the most sense.
One thing we had brought up earlier to, I guess, bring the conversation down a little bit more is the game's roughness. It's relative, of course, but Michael Alamo wrote in and said, "Hey fellas, I love this game very much, and I think as far as story and weapon variety, it absolutely beats the PS4 game in my opinion. But the only thing that bothers me is that it seems to be very rough around the edges. Do you think COVID forcing Insomniac to work from home is the cause of this? I can imagine that working from home forced them to scramble more in the polished stages of development. Otherwise, the game is excellent. Can't wait to hear what you think." So there's no doubt in my mind that this game is rougher than any Ratchet game I've ever played. And I don't know exactly how that happened, because you could say that COVID was a challenge, and I'm sure it was, but Miles Morales didn't have any noticeable issues, right? I don't remember having any issues playing Miles Morales. Not that that's a humongous game. Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
There were some bugs in Miles Morales that were pretty, like the one that I remember being really notable was when players would spawn or players would start playing as Spider-Man, and then they would shift into some random 3D object from somewhere else on the map. Like some people would like swing around as like a pile of garbage, or like a tennis shirt, or like a van or a fridge or something. Like it would be the weird, like just random assets from somewhere else on the map. And I had a couple of issues too, like where I had one issue that I remember very vividly where like I was swinging and I couldn't let go of a web. So I was like stuck in like this weird like flying animation, like, and I kept going into the sky, and I was like, oh shit. So that I have no doubt in my mind that like, and especially when you think back to like Spider-Man PS4 and how that was like I pretty much no bugs in that one that I could really remember, outside of like I'm sure maybe it like maybe crashed, probably, like I don't know, but there's no doubt in my mind that COVID probably has some effect on this stuff. It was very disruptive to the way people worked. Game development is very, very collaborative, and it's very, very dependent on having like a place where people can go like, hey, I'm going to go over there and tell them that this is wrong, and then I'm going to come right back, and that takes maybe all of like 3 minutes. Now that's where now that's an email chain, and the person might be working on something, and then they check it like an hour later, and it's like, oh shit, I just worked on this thing for however long, and that's exactly what I shouldn't have done if I had known this email existed. There's a whole litany of reasons why games that were made during the pandemic are probably like a lot less polished than games that might have happened before or after. But it wouldn't surprise me if this game, not that I've had any noticeable issues with this one, but it wouldn't surprise me if that's a pretty big factor into just how polished this game is in comparison to previous ones that were made under very, very, very different circumstances.
Yeah, it's a good point. I don't remember all that stuff with Miles, so you have a better memory than me. But I look at it and I wonder, because I was playing the game, I think what made this stand out so much, Dustin, in some way was I just went back and played Ratchet PS4 again and platinumed it just a couple months ago. And so it's fresh on my mind. Like I remember it. And I was surprised in this game. I'm like, why can't I jump there? Why can't I go there? Why am I dying when I try to do this? Why? Like I remember this one platform where there are platforms clearly underneath you. I'm like, all right, I'll go down there, and then you just die because you're not supposed to go down there. Or there's just a set of boxes that are beckoning you to climb them because maybe there's a secret up there, and it's just you're hitting into an invisible wall. And this seemed to be, these are the finer touches that get lost when clearly the game's done. They're like, we can't deal with this barrier around the boxes. We can't deal with this die when you go down there. And I feel like I was seeing a lot of stuff like that in the game, and I think it's pretty obvious. What do you think?
Yeah, beyond just that, that's like almost like, is design bugs the right word? That it's like, oh, this is giving the player the wrong impression of something they can do. We need to change that. So there's that element of it, but also like actual bugs as well. I think I mentioned this on Sacred, but I think I fell through the floor once. I landed in some area where I physically, like my character could not move. I don't know if it was like between some rocks or something, but I was like, I literally can't do anything. I had the game crash, not a horrible amount, maybe 2 or 3 times towards the end. And then the biggest offense of all was I actually had the game like corrupt my save, which I was lucky in the fact that I maybe only had to redo like 20 minutes because of a cloud save, but that that issue is like probably the worst one. And I've even heard of like one of my friends, Jimmy. He had the game. He had it eat his save like multiple times as he was playing, and he kept losing like 30 to 45 minutes of gameplay. And he's like, I don't know why this is happening. Which again, that connects to some of the discussion we've had with like Ben's PlayStation 5 and like just the weird variability in that like I never had Returnal crash. Not one time did it ever crash for me. And then something like Ratchet, I had 3 crashes, and then other people have Returnal crash all the time. It's like there's something.
Yeah, there's something up.
I mean, obviously, it's their software stuff that probably Insomniac could improve on, but there is something a little weird about PS5 hardware.
Yeah, I was going to say too that it's all relative, and I want to kind of put a point on that, because the game is still beautiful. It still runs great. It's still a ton of fun to play. It's just that when you have these high expectations, a studio being talked about in the same breath as Naughty Dog, not yet. Let's hold up on that.
It's like 97% done. You know, like there's so few things that need to be done to make that need to be done to make it like a proper like fully polished game. It's so close because I really couldn't notice. Like I had like maybe like 2 weird gameplay experiences. It never crashed on me once. So I have a positive experience on that. Never had a save corrupted or anything. I fell through the floor once, and there was one point where I was like trying to cross into one of the static rifts that you're just meant to walk through. I was trying to pass through that, and it wouldn't let me. It was like a wall, and I was like, "Oh, weird." But then I dashed through it, and it worked, and it was like very, very, very bizarre because I know that that's not how that works ever throughout the game. So I was like, "All right, that's a little weird." But if they could just fix that stuff and just like maybe. I mean, not that they would really go back into this game and get rid of invisible walls because they're there for a reason, but you know, just little things like that kind of hamper it just a little bit, because there were moments, like you said, Colin, where I was like, I feel like I should be able to go there, but I can't.
Yeah, the visual language is telling you that you can do something, and that's what Dustin, I think, brought up acutely, which is there might have been an issue with even playtesting this game in a proper way for the game to communicate what they think it's communicating. This is, of course, a huge challenge and why playtesting is so important for big AAA games. But and we gone like an hour without even bringing it up. Chris, what did you think about the Rift kind of transport thing? I feel like it was cool. But I actually found it quite disorienting as well, like where you're like, oh, you're in this new frame in the same screen or whatever when you're fighting a boss. But it's cool. I do feel like they were overstating the nature of the importance of it to the game, though.
Yeah, it's a cool effect. And I appreciate the work that goes into it, because it is like a really interesting way to kind of have a grapple mechanic where like you don't really grapple at all. You kind of pull the world towards you. But at the same time, it's not as satisfying as using physics to get to a place. You know, like I don't know. Like I found it kind of a little one note after a while. And I did think there were some moments like on the gas on the mining planet where like it's swapped between like, hey, here's a populated planet and here's the destroyed version. And I thought that was cool. Like that was neat. Especially because it happened so quick. But the overall like grapple to this rift and, you know, to walk through this portal and you're in a new place. It got a little bit old. Not that it still wasn't cool, but it didn't impress me after like halfway through the game. There were some moments where it was fun though, like specifically when the game chains the grapples, the wall runs, the grinds, and the rifts. That I thought was like, those were the moments that I felt like I was actually having the most fun, because it reminded me most of Sunset Overdrive and the way that you would like grind and kind of like zoom and like spin around on lampposts and like traversal. Insomniac is really good at making satisfying traversal. I think they're almost better at that than they are at weapons, which is kind of probably a controversial thing to say, but you know, I found those sequences so fun that whenever they were over, I was like, ah, now I'm back to like being on foot. And even then I would try to like make up for it with the gravity boots where I could just like skate across the ground, which is also just super fun. So overall, like I thought the riffs were cool. I don't know, like if they were gone in the next game, I don't know if I'd miss them necessarily, but it was a nice experience for this specific story and title, and because they work so well with the story as well, I think it feels extra cohesive.
What do you think about that gimmick, so-called gimmick, Dustin?
Yeah. So I'm with Chris in that the ones where you just like pull yourself forward, pretty cool at first, but by the end I wasn't really feeling anything about it. As far as the entire world changing, the thing that the SSD, is what made that all possible. I was thinking about this, and what's so weird is that a lot of people want to bring up like, oh, Titanfall 2 did this, or Dishonored 2 had a level that did this. I'm like, yeah, that's true. It's nowhere near to the same scale, but I was like, there may be some merit to that, because it's like the same trick but done in a much more advanced way. Which, to their credit, I mean, again, this is early days of the PS5. It's so cool. There's an interview again with Digital Foundry, and I think it's the lead technical designer on Ratchet Clank, and they were saying that they first moved the Ratchet Clank engine over to PS5, and they were like, "Oh, our engine is too slow." Like, it used to be that our engine was way faster than the hard drive, and now our engine is way too slow for the SSD. And so, they were saying that like other games have done something like this, but again, this is like we're loading the entire level in and out when you do this. So it just gives me hope for like, what really can be done. What are the possibilities? And again, this is why we need PS5 only games from first party.
It's it's pretty important to just take advantage of this hardware, especially if like you could do cool shit. Like, yeah, there is something to be said about the Titan, because I do know that when I saw that Titanfall level for the first time, it blew my fucking mind.
Dude,
and there's
it's so
no
good.
doubt, and there's no doubt in my mind that if I hadn't played Titanfall 2 and I had played this, that this would have blown my mind more than it had, just because that's such a cool trick, and to see it at this scale is still certainly impressive after Titanfall 2. It's just not this shock to the system of something that's like totally new, because you can reference like, oh, this is like Titanfall 2 but crazy,
Right.
like but I still think it was like those like loading in the entire level at once sequences were like really cool, really fun.
Yeah, it is cool. It's, to me, it's just another reminder. I guess it's the pessimistic Colin character that people are used to, but just falling for marketing in some way. I mean, they're obviously going to market this thing in such a way. And Chris, you're totally right. There are parts of the game where it's like, holy moly, man, this is awesome. Like, you're grinding into the wall runs and the cool noises they make, like the noise, and then you're going into, and then you reach out and you teleport forward, and it's really cool. It's just that those moments aren't incredibly common. I always liked going into the rifts that you'd find to go find new items or whatever, like gear. And I gotta say too, I barely even mess with the gear. Like, there's a whole armor system where you're getting sets of armor, and I don't think I even equipped anything, to be honest, the entire game, because it's one of those things we talked about before where I don't get into games equipment systems when they're subpar, or I hate when games have upgrade trees and they suck and you don't even care if you get any upgrades. One of the things I wanted to bring up here, and I guess this goes into, I don't know, did you guys mess with the Rhino at all? Did you guys get the Rhino weapon?
I heard about it. So like, I saw some of the stuff, but I never got to it.
Yeah, so the Rhino is a famous Ratchet and Clank weapon, and this is, I think, Rhino 8. And so the first Rhino is it's RYNO, and it's rip you a new one. That's what it means. And it's the unlockable, like, super weapon that almost breaks the game. But there's an interesting thing here. And Paul McFerrin wrote in and said, howdy, boys. How awesome was it to see some PlayStation 2 and 3 era Easter eggs in Rift Apart, from the Lorbs to the Rhino? Insomniac sure does know how to tug on those nostalgic heartstrings. So I wanted to just give a shout out to these. I actually pulled them up on IGN, especially with the Rhino. If you just use the Rhino, the following characters could appear in the game. So Sly Cooper, Bentley from Sly Cooper and their van, Jack and Daxter and the Precursor Orb, Sully's plane and their Jeep, and the Furba dagger from Uncharted 2, and then the Thunderjaw and Sawtooth from Horizon, and then some Insomniac things. Song of the Deep has a reference in here. I don't know if you guys remember that. Song of the Deep was a 2015 Metroidvania that Insomniac published with GameStop, and it came to PS4. And then Fizzy and Overcharge are in there as well. And there's even orbs, like you can turn and you guys know this, but you can turn the bolts into various things. And so some of them is the Sunset Overdrive drink, and then some of them are God of War orbs, which is cool. So a lot of different PlayStation references if you mess around with the Rhino or not. And then there are some Easter eggs that people think they're seeing in there. Like they think there's a Kingdom Hearts Easter egg. They think that there's a Knack Easter egg. I don't know if you guys remember the PS1 game Intelligent Cube. It seems like they might reference that game, which is pretty funny. So a lot of really cool stuff in there I wanted to shout out. And then I was going to say Ben Kaiser. It's Ken Beiser wrote in and said, hey, CDC, I have a question about Ratchet's trophies. I've really enjoyed some of the trophy lists across PS3 and 4 for Ratchet games, but I found Rift Apart's trophy list really lacking. No trophy for all gold bolts, no skill points, which was surprising. No trophy for Omega weapons or maxing them to level 10, and no trophy for all upgrades for every weapon, just to name a few. It felt like they missed an opportunity to really make us trophy hunters sit down and experience all their game had to offer. I'm hoping the next Ratchet game has a better trophy list. Am I off the mark here? I know you guys don't care about this, but I did want to throw in, this trophy list is incredibly controversial. If you go to PSN profiles or like some of the places where people talk about trophies, there are just hundreds of people in these forum threads just bitching about this list because it sucks. It has a 17%, the platinum is 17% common. So it's a platinum that people are stumbling into. Chris, did you earn a lot of trophies? You have it shut off, but did you accidentally earn the platinum? Because I actually think this is a game where if you began playing New Game Plus and played it for about 30 minutes, you will get the platinum trophy, pretty much guaranteed.
Yeah, I don't think I got the platinum for it. Like, because I didn't even have a full I didn't even have a full second weapon wheel when I beat Emperor Nefarious.
Right, like if you don't get the Rhino, you can't get the platinum.
Yeah. I didn't get the Rhino. So like I don't believe so. I actually don't know. I wonder, hold on. Can I check on the website?
Yeah, go to PSN profiles and just update your name. Dustin, how did you do with trophies?
I'm looking at it right now. I'm doing what Chris is, and I have a 60% completion, and I never looked at the trophies until now. And now I'm like, this is.
I mean, it's there for the taking, dude. This is an easy platinum. Very
seems easy enough, yeah.
And so if you care, you care. If you don't, you don't. But I agree that this is too much. People used to complain about how hard a lot of first-party trophy lists were. Insomniac made one of the worst trophy lists ever with Resistance 2, where you had to kill 10,000 people online to get a gold trophy. So that was like one of the most ridiculous trophies ever. I think this is an overreaction now. I feel like they're getting it's too easy. I think you want your platinum completion in the 5 to 10% range if you're making a AAA game, unless the entire idea is making the trophy list harder. And I talked about this a little bit when we released the Habroxia 2 update on PS4, but when we release the game on PS5 and Xbox Series X natively, we are remaking the trophy and achievements list, and they're going to be insane compared to the original game. Like, that's our idea, is to say because you get the PS Vita, PS4, and PS5 version all at once. You get the Xbox Series X and the Xbox One version all at once. And then the Switch and PC versions, who cares? They don't have the lists, so it doesn't matter. They'll just get the updates. But with the PS5 and Xbox Series X ones, we're going to put trophy lists up so hard that it'll be like the expert version of the game. And we're excited about that, because then you can go get the easy trophies on PS4 or come play with the big boys on PS5 and beat the stages without getting hit, and beat the stages without upgrading your ship, and beat the bosses without getting hit, and do all the other things that we're going to make you do to get any trophies at all in the game.
Dude, Ben mentioned that to me actually, and I heard about some of these trophies. It's bold, to say the least.
It's going to be
Pretty
the
bold.
antithesis of Herbroxia 2 on PS4, which has a 1 in 3 platinum rating. I assume this platinum will be below 1%. I mean, I know that Barry can do it. I'm writing the trophies and I'm not even going to bother, I don't think. Because I know Barry is so expert at the game that he can prove that it can be done. And that's all we have to do. And then we can just put them out in the wild and see what happens. So instead of beating a stage, you'll beat the stage without getting hit. Instead of beating the boss, you'll beat the boss without any upgrades. Shit like that. And
That's what I heard. The no hit is what Ben told me. I wasn't going to say it, but dang, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be awesome. I hope it just drives people insane. And remember, there's nothing to complain about because you just get even on PS5, you just get the PS4 version too. You can download them both. And so there's nothing to complain about. You can either opt in or opt out, be a baby or be an adult. You know, up to you.
So wait, you're a baby then? Because you said you're not going to do it.
Yeah, I'm definitely a baby. I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not good enough at Herbroxia 2 to do that shit. But maybe. I mean, I wrote it. It would be nice to be able to do it. Okay. Let's get into some of these other final questions as we wrap it up, boys. Braden Brown wrote in and said, "Hello there, you beautiful, sexy men. My question is about the future of the series. I don't think we've seen the last of Rivet and Kit. Well, I certainly hope not. And how will Insomniac go about this in the sequels? Is it possible to get a standalone series focused on just the two, or will the future games just be Ratchet and Clank games where the others are possibly just featured? I'm guessing the latter, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks, baby boys." Chris, here's my guess. The next Ratchet and Clank game will be called Rivet and Kit. What do you think?
I think it's possible. I don't know enough about this series to like make these grand predictions as to what the sequel will absolutely be, but it does seem like they're teeing them off in some way to do something, because like they wouldn't set up these characters if they weren't going to do anything with them. I do find it curious that they leave the game on kind of a cliffhanger ending, sort of like it not that there's no resolution, but
well, they're going to go try to find the Lombaxes, right, or whatever.
Yeah, so I wonder if I'm really curious if they're going to just be like, hey, it's Rivet and Kit this time and that's it, or if it's like a co-op type deal. Like I really have no fucking clue.
Yeah, we had a co-op Ratchet once, which was well regarded, all for one. So it could happen again. Dustin, what do you make of my proclamation that there'll be a Ratchet and Clank game called Rivet and Kit?
That would be cool. I was wondering if it would work from a branding standpoint. Like if PlayStation marketing is like, no, it has to have Ratchet and Clank in the title. Okay. I'm going to throw you a curveball here.
Please.
Okay. Is it possible that Ratchet and Rivet could be an item? Could they be? Because I thought,
I was confused by that. I was confused by what they were trying to do with them. I got to say. Right.
It's like you're the only two Lombaxes you know of. Of course you want to fuck. Like, period. What else are you gonna do? Sure. Like, but on the other hand, they're alternate dimension versions of each other. So is it like being in love with yourself?
Yeah, maybe it's a little bit of a play on the ego. I don't know. I was having these two ideas marinating in my head as we were just briefly discussing this. This is really ridiculous, but it would be cool if they made two games or one game that literally had two campaigns that were separate, where they somehow intertwine with each other at the end. So you do play as Rivet and Kit and you do play as Ratchet and Clank. But my other thought was maybe they'll do since this seems to be expansion world now, and certainly they made a bunch of expansions for Spider-Man, that maybe they'll make a Rivet and Kit expansion, like a standalone $30, maybe $40 game. I don't know. I mean, I just feel like those characters are great. I like Kit. The thing with Rivet and Ratchet to me was I wasn't ever really clear. I'm like, are they friends or are they more than friends? Are they trying to make them friends or are they trying to make them more than friends? Because I want them to be more than friends. But I never even got like Rivet is a feminine character, but I never got the femininity out of her. I don't know if they're trying to make her almost like non-binary or, you know what I mean? So I never really got like, they didn't kiss or anything, you know, as far as I remember. You know, I think that would have been kind of cool if there's a little romance, but
I think the issue is I think the issue is because they're the same character. So it's like, is this a little too Sweet Home Alabama, you know?
Well, it's like Back to the Future,
there's
as well in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I know what you're saying because I felt like that's where it was going, but at the same time, if it had happened, I feel like I would have felt like deeply uncomfortable by it. They kind of locked themselves into a weird situation with the fact that they're just clearly alternate dimension versions of the same character.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's you know what sucks about it too is they probably could have made something really funny out of that if this was still like the old school Ratchet and Clank style, like innuendo laden kind of tongue in cheek, wink wink, nod nod to adults in the audience type game. It's actually almost like perfectly suited to this kind of like ridiculous story and premise.
Yeah, it's fun. It is funny to think about that.
Yeah.
There's some like potential like self-love jokes here where like, oh, it's, would you be in a relationship with a female version of yourself? It's like, but they're the only other person of your species alive.
Yeah, it gets complex. I mean, they're lonely. I mean, that's part of that. It ultimately is part of Ratchet's story is that he's lonely. He doesn't understand who he is and where there's much to learn. And I like that they get into that. But you're right. The whole spatial nexus issue of them being kind of the same as a mitigating issue. Let me wrap up with this, Dustin. I'll kick it to you first. Timothy Martin wrote in and said, Colin and team, short and sweet. Is this the game PlayStation needed to justify the PS5 purchase?
Well, okay. Timothy, I care about you. I hate this question though, because no one game should ever justify the purchase of a console. You got to look at the whole wide array of things. I guess some people operate that way. So maybe it's a very valid question. I would argue you shouldn't operate by like, oh, is this one game worth buying a console for? I mean, the answer is no. If we're gonna play the game, it's definitely not worth buying a PS5 just for this game. It'd be worth buying a PS5, in my opinion, for the multitude of benefits you get as far as the better backwards compatibility, Demon Souls, Returnal, the wide array. But maybe another way to look at it is like, is this the game that justifies like the PS5 hardware? And I don't know if it does that either, but it definitely gives us a glimpse of the future of the hardware with how advanced. A lot of it, I referenced that interview earlier with the technical designer. He's like, this is what we had time to figure out on PS5. We're kind of just scratching the surface. So yeah, the answer overall though is no, but that doesn't take anything away from the game.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dustin, in the sense that I don't think this game justifies the PS5 at all. I think it's cool. I think you have to take a collection of games and experiences and see if it's justified for you now at this point. And Ratchet might be part of that collection. I actually think that if you like Demon Souls and you like Ratchet and you like Returnal, well, you're not really going to know if you like Returnal, but if you like those kinds of games, then you might now have a reason to buy the system. But the reason I say what I say is simply because I don't want people to feel like they're being left out. I don't feel like you're losing out like I would have at this point with PS4 or PS2. I think I'm at the same place I was at PS3 and now with PS5. Chris, what do you think? Is this the game that justifies it all?
No, I think I'm in agreement with you guys. I think I don't think you can really lock an entire console down to one game. There's even Nintendo consoles, like people have a myriad of titles that they love on that system. Animal Crossing, Smash Brothers, all the 3D Mario games, Mario Golf, whatever the hell. You got to look at the overall breadth of what's available and, what the machine offers you, what the ecosystem offers you, and just make your decision based on that. I don't think this game... I know this is going to sound hypocritical, and I understand that, but like, I'm not normally a length equals value person, and I don't think I am in this case either. I would just say, like, if you bought a new machine for this game specifically, I don't know if that would be a wise decision because you've got maybe a weekend's worth of time out of this.
Yeah.
And maybe you can go to Astrobot, but like you're there's, it's not the game. It's definitely one of the more impressive uses of the hardware, no doubt. I think it's probably the only real use of the hardware that I think has any real substantive impact on game design and the way the way sequences can come together in real time. I think it's definitely the best showcase for the PS5. But I don't know if this is the game that you want to. It's not going to give you the most bang for your buck if you're wanting to get a lot of use out of your $500 machine.
I was going to say, I mean, now you got to wait, right? Well, here's the thing. I said this. We don't know of any first or second party PlayStation 5 exclusive games now at all that are, I mean, obviously they're coming, but Horizon, God of War, and Gran Turismo are coming up next, and they're all on PS4. So now we've gotten through the PS5 game. So now if you got through this and you're not feeling hungry, I don't know. I don't know that the next games are going to change your mind either. You got through Miles Morales, you know, all the rest. And all you're missing out on is a Demon Souls remake, which I don't want to say all you're missing out on, and a Ratchet and Clank game and an arcade game that is way inaccessible and not selling well. I don't know if you guys saw, I don't want to get into Returnal, but like Returnal, I think Wario64 is the one that tweeted this, like Returnal starting to pop up for like $30 used, which is horrible. So, you know, these are the guys that would charge you $65 for a used game that's a couple months old. So, or 60.
Yeah.
So it's just, I don't know what the future now looks like because they made, I think, a grave error in not making some of these games exclusive. But that's for another conversation, boys. And in the meantime, this was our conversation about Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, PlayStation 5 exclusive. I think it'll stay there. I had this theory that I think they could rework it to go on PS4, but I don't know how or why they would do that at this point. So that's it. We appreciate your love, kindness, and support of all things we do here on Last Stand and Last Stand Media. Thank you for supporting us on Patreon, and we hope you continue to enjoy the cacophony of content that's coming out. 2 episodes of Sacred Symbols plus a week, plus Sacred Symbols. That's 3 episodes plus Defining Duke, 4 episodes Defining Duke Ultimate, 5 episodes Knockback, 6 episodes a week. So we hope you enjoy. Thank you. We'll talk to you later. Goodbye.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.